In 10 years, there'll be 100 new Spartans in the war. Employing several of these new Spartans to help train the next classes, there'll be 1,000 within 20 years. With projected improvements in technology, perhaps 100,000 new Spartans will be created in just 30 years. The words of Colonel James Ackerson. No one would question the success of the Spartan-II program. It created some of humanity's greatest warriors. Once the Covenant arrived, these super soldiers were some of the only units capable of fighting and prevailing against the Covenant's overwhelming might. But Dr. Halsey's own personal feelings regarding the program, and the diversion of resources at the start of the Human Covenant War, resulted in no subsequent class of the twos. Only 75 candidates had gone through the program, with less than half successfully taking to the augmentations. Halsey's stringent age and genetic requirements restricted the potential pool of candidates too tightly, which made the mass production of Spartans nearly impossible. Thus, a new Spartan program would be developed, directed by Colonel James Ackerson, a ruthless, logical, and cunning Oni liaison officer. Ackerson wouldn't let his personal beliefs or feelings cloud the reality of humanity's situation. The Covenant were far, far more advanced than humanity, and had proven this fact time and time again. During the Second Battle of Harvest, it took the combined might of 40 UNSC warships to combat a single Covenant interdictor-class vessel, losing 13 of their ships in the process. The technological disparity between humanity and the Covenant in space combat was far too wide. The Covenant could easily outbuild the UNSC's fleet. They had energy shielding, stronger hulls, faster slipspace drives, and their utterly devastating energy weaponry. Using superior tactics and leveraging the Covenant's desire to obtain Forerunner artifacts, the UNSC was at points able to best the Covenant. But the only force that was able to consistently fight and win against the Covenant were the elite strike teams known as Spartans. When the fate of humanity hung in the balance, it was the Spartans that the UNSC had to rely on. The only problem was that there just weren't enough of them. So, learning from the successes and failures of Halsey's program, Ackerson would set out to create his own Spartans, known as the Spartan-IIIs. Ackerson's core doctrine was as follows: make the units better with new technology, make more of them, and make them cheaper. Today, we're going to explore the entire history and operational record of the Spartan-III program, starting from its very inception. After the death of Spartan-II Samuel 034, Kurt Ambrose would replace him among the Master Chief's Blue Team. The team was at first skeptical of Kurt, uneasy at the idea of replacing their friend so soon after his death. But Kurt's strong instincts would prove invaluable to the team. During a raid on an insurrectionist base, it was Kurt who was able to accurately predict and counter the enemy's plans, saving Blue Team from near certain death. Soon, Linda, Kelly, Fred, and John would grow to trust Kurt a great deal. Sometime later, Blue Team would be assigned to an extravehicular mission to investigate suspicious activity around a UNSC construction platform codenamed Delphi. Kurt would be the first Spartan to approach the station, stumbling upon a ruptured Shah Fujikawa drive. Kurt's communication systems would begin experiencing malfunctions. Unable to contact his fellow Spartans, Kurt began to back away from the slipspace drive. But suddenly, Kurt's Series 8 jetpack would malfunction, tossing him into the darkness of space. It all happened so fast that none of the Spartans would be able to stop his acceleration. Kurt keyed his comm to Blue Team and activated his emergency beacon, but to no avail. He was sent hurtling into the blackness of open space. Officially, Kurt would be listed as MIA, presumed to be dead by the Spartans of Blue Team. But this wouldn't be the full truth of the matter. The Office of Naval Intelligence's Beta 5 Division, a top secret cell within Section 3, had fabricated the entire mission at Delphi. Their plan was to stage Spartan 051's death and recover him for use as an instructor in the newly devised Spartan-III program. Kurt awoke within a medical bay. Taking in his surroundings, he realized that he was aboard a UNSC ship. A door slid open, and a man in an army uniform walked in. He wore the eagle insignia of a colonel, and Kurt quickly snapped to attention. "At ease," the man said. "I am Colonel James Ackerson." Ackerson shook the Spartan's hand. An unusual sentimentality Kurt had rarely experienced from other members of the UNSC. Ackerson asked his name. "Kurt, sir." "Yes, but Kurt what? What is your family name?" Kurt briefly recalled his childhood, a time of his life that seemed more dream than reality. "It doesn't matter," Ackerson said. "For the time being, if asked, use the last name Ambrose." "Yes, sir." Ackerson would go on to explain what had happened at Delphi, how Oni had fabricated the mission just to get him in this room without a trace. Ackerson's plan to use Kurt to train a new generation of Spartans, and the details of this new program. Looking at the datapad of information, Kurt would comment how the new bio-augmentations were a quantum leap ahead of what he and his Spartans had received, but with only a fraction of the training time and budget. The Spartans' Mjolnir armor was to be replaced by something called semi-powered infiltration armor, or SPI. "These new candidates, sir," Kurt asked. "You're trying to do more with less." Ackerson nodded. "They'll be sent on missions with higher strategic value, but correspondingly lower survival probabilities. That's where you come in, Kurt. We need your training as a Spartan, and all your field experiences passed along to these candidates. You need to make these Spartans better and train them faster. This program may be the key to our survival in this war." With a wider genetic pool of candidates and these improved augmentations, Ackerson planned to create hundreds more Spartan supersoldiers. Perhaps even enough to stand against the overwhelming might of the Covenant. Just as the planet Reach was the home of the Spartan-IIs, Onyx would be the home of the IIIs. Onyx was a world ridden with Forerunner artifacts, a quality that had meant Oni had concealed the planet's location from nearly all navigational charts, even from those within the UNSC. This made it the perfect spot to train the Spartan-IIIs. A hidden world, away from the compromising eyes of the rest of humanity, and far from the front lines of the Human Covenant War. On December 27, 2532, the first group of Spartan-III candidates, codenamed Alpha Company, would arrive on the planet Onyx to the training facility Camp Currahee. The candidates consisted mostly of orphans from the colonies glassed by the Covenant. In total, there were 497 of them, ages 4 to 6 years old. Kurt had prepared for their arrival for a good 6 months, setting up obstacle courses, classrooms, firing ranges, mess halls, and dormitories. Every piece of equipment that Kurt had requested was supplied without challenge, from guns, ammunition, and tanks to recovered Covenant technology. A team of hand-picked instructors, physical therapists, doctors, and psychologists would accompany Kurt, as well as the one Kurt regarded as the most important to the training of this new generation of super soldiers. Senior Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez, the instructor who a dozen years ago had trained Kurt and the other Spartan-IIs. The man was a living legend, and would be integral to ensuring these Spartans lived up to their predecessor's reputation. Kurt would remark that these new candidates had one trait that would propel them past the twos: motivation. Jericho 7, Harvest, and Biko. All colonies destroyed by the Covenant. These candidates had all been requisitioned from the scant few survivors of these worlds. Kurt could see in many of the candidates' eyes a burning hatred, something he planned to use to turn them into the most effective fighting force that he could. As the candidates unloaded from the Pelicans, Kurt and the rest of the training staff stood to meet them. He addressed the crowd. "I'm going to give you a chance to learn how to fight. A chance to destroy the Covenant. I'm giving you a chance to be like me, a Spartan. You want to be Spartans? Then get back on those ships." Many of them stood there shocked, but a few had begun returning to the Pelicans behind them. Ultimately, there was only 300 slots available, and yet 497 candidates. So Kurt planned on swiftly separating who was capable from who wasn't. Not only were the candidates going to parachute out of a Pelican at an age as young as 4 years old, they were going to do it in the darkness of night. No doubt, accidents would happen. But this would quickly separate the willing from the rest. Kurt would hate the necessity of it. Over the next 4 years, these children would undergo some of the most brutal and rigorous training, turning them into one of humanity's most elite fighting forces. Due to the advancements seen in bio-augmenters, all 300 candidates would successfully take to their augmentations. A new class of 300 Spartans had just been born. The class would garner an exemplary record, being deployed to quell an insurrection in Mamor, fighting the Covenant at the Battle of New Constantinople, and at the Bonanza asteroid belt. Just 9 months after the company's activation, they would be sent on what would be their most dangerous mission. An assignment that Ackerson knew would cost the lives of the entire company to succeed. A mission too valuable to trust in the hands of any other UNSC group. Before this, Kurt and Mendez had handpicked Spartans who demonstrated utter excellence, to be reassigned under special operations units. We know of 7 that were pulled from Alpha Company. Spartans Carter, June, Emil, Tom, and Rosenda, who would serve in the renowned Noble team, as well as Hazel and Kevin, who would become Spartan Headhunters. The rest of Alpha Company was sent on what would likely be their last mission: Operation Prometheus. The asteroid designated K749 was discovered when the UNSC Prowler, Razor's Edge, attached a telemetry probe to an enemy ship at the Battle of New Harmony. This led to the discovery of a Covenant-controlled asteroid, alongside a dozen partially constructed Covenant ships. The asteroid's artificially induced volcanism, created by 30 high-output plasma reactors, let the Covenant refine and shape the meteorological components of their ships. Given its proximity to UNSC space, the Office of Naval Intelligence regarded the asteroid as a high-priority target, and aimed to deploy the entirety of Spartan-III Alpha Company to destroy it. When the 300 Spartans made landfall, initial Covenant resistance was light, and they were able to permanently disable numerous plasma reactors. Their SPI armor, although less protective than Mjolnir, provided primitive camouflage technology, allowing the Spartans to slip in and out of combat. After 2 days of fighting, the Covenant put together a counter-force, which was swiftly thwarted by the Spartans as they continued to decimate the reactors. An additional Covenant battalion appeared in orbit, and the Spartans began facing squads of elites and Banshee flyers. Yet again, they prevailed against their attackers, using superior tactics and their augmented bodies to outmaneuver the Covenant. However, by day 7, an overwhelming Covenant force had arrived. Spartan unit cohesion began to falter, and they were nearly entirely wiped out by the Covenant reinforcements. By then, 80% of the reactors had been destroyed. Sufficient cooling caused the asteroid to be effectively inoperable. Despite completing their mission, the remaining Spartans were now cut off from their Calypso extraction craft. By this point, only 2 Spartans remained, Shane and Robert, carrying the lifeless body of their fellow Spartan Jane. After exchanging fire with a group of elites, Robert was shot in the stomach by a blot of plasma and fell to the ground. A fatal blow as his biomonitors began to flatline. In his last moments, he managed to unload his MA-5B into the elite that shot him, unpinned a grenade, and threw it at the rest of the elite fire team surrounding him. Shane watched as his fellow Spartan fell, continued to fight on, but soon ran out of ammo, switching to his M6 pistol. Just 2 meters to his side, an energy motor detonated, gleaming like a small sun. Shane now lay prone on the ground, unmoving, as the helmet's camera feed cut out. Inside the high-security UNSC conference, Odin's Eye, Kurt watched the after-action report of Operation Prometheus. Seeing how his Spartans were overwhelmed by the Covenant force and systematically killed. Kurt was utterly devastated by the loss of Alpha Company. He spent the last 7 years of his life training them, making sure they were the best Spartans they could be. And he felt as though he had failed them. Perhaps he should have trained them more harshly, enforced squad tactics more rigorously. If he had only implemented those upgrades to their armor, maybe then they would have survived. The Oni officers in the room congratulated him for the success of Alpha Company. They had performed well above projections, and caused a major setback in Covenant ship operations. But all Kurt could feel was despair. Once again, Kurt was assigned to oversee the creation of another Spartan company. Unfortunately, despite the plan to expand the program's numbers, the candidates simply did not exist, even with the reduced genetic and age screening. Over the next 6 years, another 300 Spartans would be produced in Beta Company, with improved training, better unit cohesion, and more advanced SPI armor. Just the same as Alpha Company, many promising candidates would be pulled from the main group before their final mission, Operation Torpedo. In 2545, a Covenant refinery on the moon Pegasi Delta was identified by the UNSC. The world's oceans were unusually rich in deuterium and tritium, both of which are used in the Covenant's plasma technology. UNSC Central Command had tried to nuke the moon, sending stealth-coated bombs through slipspace. But the Covenant were able to detect the nukes from their Cherenkov radiation and destroy them before they could reach their target. Even ODSTs were considered for the job, but were quickly ruled out. So Oni would have no choice but to send in the Spartans. On July 3rd, 2545, 300 of them would enter the moon's atmosphere inside their long-range stealth orbital drop pods. Deployed by the UNSC vessel All Under Heaven into slipspace, allowing them to reach the world undetected. As the Spartans hit the surface, 9 had died instantaneously, either on impact or by Covenant forces before they could leave their pod. The Spartans began making their way towards the refinery, utilizing their SPI reactive panels to blend into the rocky surroundings. The armor was highly advanced and would protect the Spartans from several glancing shots of plasma before failing. But again, in comparison to Mjolnir, it was significantly less armored, lacked shielding, and did not enhance the user's strength or speed to the same level. As the Spartans began to face light Covenant resistance, they swiftly eliminated any foe in their path. Each Spartan was trained extensively in the use of Covenant tech, so they began to pick up their fallen enemies' weapons and equipment as they ran. The baseball-sized stealth tactical aerial reconnaissance satellite, or STARS, had begun to come online, providing the Spartans with orders and directing them to their objective. Spartan Tom B292 was just 5 kilometers from the target. On the way, he would meet up with his fire team, consisting of Spartans Lucy, Min, and Adam. The Spartans, now armed with Jackal shields, began to face more serious Covenant resistance. Seraph fighters strafed all around them, spitting hot plasma as they flew by. Several Spartans lagged behind, dropped to a knee, and fired their M19B SAM missile launchers, managing to turn 2 of the craft into a pile of rubble. Still, more Seraphs came, eviscerating dozens of Spartans in the open desert that surrounded the refinery. The Covenant holding the factory began to notice the incoming threat, firing on the Spartans and creating a wall of plasma. The Spartans dove for cover, fired their missile launchers, and shot their snipers at any targets they could see. Once the enemy fire slowed, they charged. Half-camouflaged warriors ran towards the refinery, firing at the dazed jackals, all the while screaming a great battle cry. Numerous jackals broke rank, turned to flee, and got shot in their backs. But still, hundreds held their ground, forming an impenetrable phalanx with their shields. Tom and his group was able to slip by the main Covenant force, leading his team deeper into the factory. Tom clicked his comm on, sending a message to his team: move in and kill. Equipped with their MA5Ks, they made quick work of the elites and jackals that blocked their path. Behind Tom and his team, the Covenant, taking up position in the factory's cover, ran to meet their Spartan adversaries, realizing they couldn't win a fight in close quarters combat. The Spartans moved with superhuman speed and reflexes that no Covenant could follow. They dodged, snapped necks and limbs, and with captured energy swords, cut through the enemy until the field ran with rivers of gore and blue blood. Tom hesitated, faced with the decision to back up his fellow Spartans or complete the mission. But before he could react, his calm cracked to life. Omega-3, execute now. That stopped him in his tracks. Omega-3 was the panic code, an order to break and run no matter the cost. Tom was confused. They were winning. But then he saw it. The clouds moved overhead. Except they weren't clouds. Unbeknownst to them, 7 Covenant cruisers laid in low orbit overhead. The STARS system had confused the objects as being part of the refinery itself. Spartans could hold their own in ground combat, but the might of Covenant vessel weaponry would utterly destroy them. Now cornered, Tom's team decided to push on and complete their mission. The rest of Beta Company would just have to buy them time to reach the central reactor. If they could reach it and set their charges, it would produce a chain reaction and destroy the entire Covenant operation on the moon. Tom sprinted past a group of elites, tossing a concussion grenade as he left. Still, the elites quickly recovered and began firing at Tom. Spartan Adam broke off from his team to deal with the enemy, shouting at his friends to keep on sprinting. After 5 minutes of running, the remaining 3 Spartans reached the core and began setting their charges. Just as Spartan Min had set his, a white flash blinded Tom. A moment later, Min was gone, vaporized by the electromagnetic field. Lucy and Tom didn't have time to mourn their friend. They set their charges and ran at full speed to the edge of the refinery, jumping into the ocean below. Just as they landed in the water, a new sun appeared as the entire Covenant facility was set ablaze. The refinery, the cruisers, their fellow Spartans, all were gone in an instant. Lucy and Tom found their way to shore and escaped aboard their Black Cat exfiltration craft. Both were deeply emotionally traumatized, having watched all of their friends die in a matter of minutes. Lucy would be the most affected, having lost her ability to speak, something that the psychologists at ONI would call post-traumatic voice disarticulation. But still, this was not enough. Despite the crippling blows the Spartan-IIIs had inflicted in Operations Prometheus and Torpedo, the Covenant war machine marched on, torching human planets and killing billions. Kurt would once again be put in charge of a new company of Spartans, Gamma Company, his third and final attempt to create the ultimate Spartan force. But this time, he would not be the only Spartan training the next generation. Tom B-292 and Lucy B-091, the only 2 survivors of Operation Torpedo, joined him as instructors, along with a handful of washouts from previous Spartan classes. Training began on Onyx in 2545. Once again, every candidate would survive their procedures. But in addition to the standard bio-augmentations, Kurt had added one more layer of augmentation to the gammas. Each Spartan was enhanced with illegal neural mutagens, drugs that heightened aggression, strength, and endurance, but required constant chemical balance to avoid psychotic breaks. Despite the dangers, these new Spartans were faster, stronger, and more resilient than any generation before them. Kurt saw in them the culmination of everything he had learned. By late 2552, just a few weeks following the collapse of the UNSC stronghold Reach, the company was operational and sent onto the field. Out of 330 candidates, 15 would remain on Onyx, competing for top honors within the program. During the events of Halo Combat Evolved, the Master Chief unknowingly triggered a signal from Installation 04, setting all Forerunner installations to remain on standby. What was once thought to just be a regular planet had revealed itself to be a Forerunner shield world. Onyx's surface was made of trillions of sentinels. Making matters worse was a Covenant separatist fleet that arrived in orbit over the planet. Gamma Company, alongside Blue Team, consisting of Kelly, Fred, Linda, and William, repelled the Forerunner constructs and Covenant alike. The Onyx conflict itself is a very long and detailed story that we'll leave here for the purposes of this video. If you would like a full video detailing the events at Onyx, let me know in the comments down below. Now back on topic. As for the rest of Gamma Company, they would catch the tail end of the Human Covenant War, and not really be seen in any notable operations. Post-Covenant War, Gamma Company would be absorbed into the newly formed Spartan branch. One elite group of Gammas would be taken away from this main class and put into a covert Oni Ferret team, assigned for black operations and assassinations. In general, there is little information on the Spartan Gammas in Halo lore. They reside mostly in the same book from which they were first mentioned, Ghosts of Onyx, and have scant few mentions outside of it. Now that we have covered the main contingents of every Spartan-III company, I want to take a look at those Spartans that had been specially selected from Alpha and Beta companies before Operations Prometheus and Torpedo respectively. There were pretty much two paths that these Spartans could walk. Either they were assigned to special fire teams such as Noble, or made into the elite two-man teams known as Headhunters. Those Spartans assigned to special fire teams were fitted with Mjolnir-powered assault armor, and treated operationally more like Spartan-IIs. These Spartans were overseen mostly by the UNSC Navy or Army, though some did serve in the Marine Corps as well. Probably most well known among these special fire teams was Noble. Noble Team was organized as a standalone strike unit, under the control of the UNSC Army's Special Warfare Group 3. Though administratively still part of the Navy, the team was embedded directly with Army command elements, often operating in coordination with Army divisions on the front lines of major conflicts. This dual branch relationship was highly unusual, and it allowed the team to operate across theaters while bypassing traditional command. The unit was most often composed of 6 Spartans, and uniquely featured one Spartan-II, that being George 052. All members were outfitted with Mjolnir-class powered assault armor, placing them on par technologically with the IIs. It's also worth noting that these Spartans are often referred to as Category 2s, implying that they were a second iteration of the Spartan-II program. Of course they were not, but the point of that designation is that their genetics would have made them applicable to Halsey's more stringent requirements. The first known configuration of Noble Team was assembled between late 2549 and early 2550. Each member filled a unique tactical role, allowing them to act as a highly flexible surgical team capable of deployment across nearly any battlefield. Carter A259, a veteran of Alpha Company, was selected as team commander. As a tactical leader, he had demonstrated exceptional coordination skills and battlefield awareness. Following his extraction, Carter was placed into an extended Mjolnir training regimen, and completed multiple classified missions before being named Noble Team's commanding officer. Second in command was Catherine B320, or Cat, a Beta Company Spartan who had distinguished herself through her technical acumen. She previously served in Operation Cartwheel and participated in several non-attributed Oni operations across the outer colonies. Cat's designation as Executive Officer is reflective of her strategic insight. Spartan June A266, a highly skilled marksman and reconnaissance specialist who served with UNSC Army sharpshooter detachments before being reassigned to Noble Team. His background made him particularly valuable in asymmetric engagements and long-range target interdiction. Emil A239, also from Alpha Company, is most well known for his brutal efficiency and close quarters combat prowess. At a young age, Emil lost his parents to insurrectionist activity on the planet Aradnis II, and was subsequently raised by his older brother. When the Covenant arrived and began glassing his planet, his brother would sacrifice himself so that Emil could live. These events gave Emil a searing hatred for both the insurrectionists and Covenant alike, something that made Oni consider him a volatile asset. However, his operational record would speak for itself, landing him a spot on Noble Team. Tom A293 was the original Noble 6, serving with the team through several early campaigns, including a series of joint Army-Oni operations throughout the outer colonies. In April of 2552, Tom was killed in action during the Battle of Fumirole, sacrificing himself to deliver a Fury tactical nuclear warhead into the heart of a Covenant assault carrier, effectively neutralizing the ship, but at the cost of his life. Tom's death was seen as a major operational loss, and left a vacuum in Noble Team's composition. The team was devastated by his death, which is why it's no surprise that when only a matter of weeks later, when Spartan B312 was assigned to Noble Team, most of the group was uncomfortable with having his spot filled so soon. B312's history remains largely classified, but what we do know is that he/she was used primarily by an unknown Oni officer as a lone wolf against terrorist organizations and insurrectionist cells. Additionally, Noble 6 was a test pilot for the secretive Saber program, a fact that would come in handy during Noble Team's Operation Uppercut. Rosenda A344, another Alpha Company graduate, was at one point considered for Noble Team as well. She may have been the placeholder for Noble 4 before Emil was selected. While Rosenda never deployed with Noble Team in any known operation, her profile suggests that she was under close evaluation by Oni, and remains an active combatant in the post-war Spartan branch. Structurally, Noble Team operated as a semi-autonomous unit, often deployed alongside or in support of Army mechanized divisions, particularly on worlds facing imminent Covenant invasion or where ground superiority had already been lost. This allowed them to have a more immediate tactical impact on the battlefield and demonstrated the evolving use of Spartans not just as surgical assets, but as force multipliers in full-scale engagements. Several of their early missions remain classified, but military dispatch logs suggest that Noble Team participated in planetary defense efforts on Fumirole, Scathi, and possibly Miradim, engaging in operations that spanned urban warfare, high-altitude reconnaissance, and counterinsurgency against both Covenant and colonial elements. Some reports from late 2551 also linked the team to strategic asset denial operations, preventing Covenant forces from capturing Oni facilities or data caches across multiple threatened colonies. What distinguished Noble from the other Spartan fireteams wasn't just their gear or chain of command, it was their strategic utility. By mid-2552, the team had developed into one of Oni's most successful hybrid field assets, while their operational future would ultimately culminate in the fall of Reach. In addition to Noble Team, Red, Echo, and Gauntlet teams, all composed of Mjolnir-clad Spartan-IIIs, were deployed in planetary defenses of Tribute and Reach. In both of these instances, the Spartan fireteams were tasked with holding off Covenant air and ground forces to support civilian evacuations. On Reach, by August 30th, 13 Spartan-IIIs had perished near the Azad shipbreaking yards, the last evacuation point on the continent of Epos. Soon after, Noble 6 would make his final stand on the same location, walking by the bodies of his fellow Spartans. If a reassigned Spartan-III wasn't put in one of these special fire teams, they were pulled into an even more secretive program. The Headhunters, as they were known, were two-man teams pulled from top-performing Spartan-IIIs. They were trained to operate deep behind enemy lines, without backup, and with the full expectation that they would not return. Essentially, they were used like most Spartan-IIIs, but with slightly better gear and a lot more black tape. Their existence was so secretive that even their fellow Spartans didn't know they were gone. Once selected, they were whisked away from Camp Currahee and sent to specialized training camps on the far side of the planet. The pair bonds of Spartans were thoroughly evaluated by trainers and psychologists alike, ensuring that team chemistry was flawless. At any one time, Oni kept 6 active Headhunter pairs on rotation, with another 5 individuals ready to replace fallen members. The Headhunters wore a far more advanced variant of SPI armor, outfitted with visor systems, motion tracking, active camouflage modules, and even rudimentary energy shielding. Spartans Jonah B-283 and Roland B-210 were 2 such Headhunters. They were sent to an unnamed Covenant-controlled moon, identified as a staging ground for a Forerunner dig site. Jonah and Roland inserted 20 miles from their first target, trekking for 7 days through hostile terrain. Using their advanced SPI armor, they managed to slip past Covenant sentries and eliminate their first objective with brutal precision. Roland infiltrated the camp under active camouflage, placing charges on the base's reactor cores. Jonah triggered the attack, distracting and eliminated Covenant forces with an energy disruptor and flares. But it was all a trap. As Roland confirmed detonation readiness, he was ambushed and killed by a cloaked elite. Jonah activated his visor, realizing too late that they were surrounded by 5 of the elite Silent Shadow. Injured but thinking tactically, Jonah lured them toward his disruptor's field, detonated the planted explosives, and killed them all, except for one, Jagger Radomni, who would survive with catastrophic injuries, including the loss of an arm and mandibles. Despite losing their lives, the Spartans were able to divert this elite unit of Covenant from other operations, and even managed to eliminate nearly all of them, making the operation a tactical victory. And that's just about everything you should know about the Spartan-III program. From the conception of Alpha Company, down to the Gammas and Noble Team. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. If you have any ideas for future videos, or just want to have a discussion about the Spartan-IIIs, then let me know in the comments down below. I'll be sure to respond to as many as I can. And as always, thank you for watching.